Wonderful. We have some administrative items that we'd like you to know about. First of all, what has become known as David Greenwood's baby, the bank calendar, is available once again this year, courtesy of the Bank of Millbrook. And David is the architectural artist of this particular calendar, and has been for, I guess, the better part of 20 years or so. Put together a beautiful set of local sketches. These are not photographs this year, as they've been traditionally in the past, but a series of various sketches of local sites in the town of Washington and village of Millbrook. And it's, as I say, available from the bank. We don't have extra copies here tonight, so may I encourage you to go to the bank, ask for your copy of the bank calendar, the more the merrier. We'd love to see some traffic down there, in other words, our presence that says, yes, the bank should be continuing to do, supporting and producing this calendar on an annual basis. And it takes your acceptance of it to make that come true. So please do so. I'll tell you that, as I say, the drawings are all local sites, but there was one poignant and I say pretty sad situation involving the November 2015 drawing. Beautiful little sketch. It's not nothing to call right home to mom about, or I would put it, but it's a beautiful little sketch of the Dutchess Day School. It was done by a local personality and artist by the name of Britta Murray. Britta Murray passed away this last Christmas. And I just heard tonight, I believe, Allison, you said that Scott had been one of her students at one time?
I think so.
Okay, apparently she was a well-known personality. I didn't know her personally, but apparently very well-known locally and a major contributor to the art community and so on. And she is to be memorialized now by her entry in the 2015 calendar for November. But sad to report that, because that's the situation. But the calendars are ready to pick up. Go on down to the bank, help yourself, and take more than one if you'd really like to. Well, Mary and I have a couple of these at home. Okay, moving on. Our archivist team, Kathy Derringer and Bernadette Szymanski and Susan Farjon and Linda Goltz, and a team behind them have been very, very active in our archives. They meet usually twice a week, various days of the week, to carry out the collection and cataloging and preservation of our historical artifacts for our town and village. And what they've done is unique because they have another display in the library, the Millbrook Library, right on Friendly Lane. And the display is called Millbrook Inside and Out. And Bernadette, would you like to describe what that display is?
The display is pictures and some artifacts of storefronts and the interior of stores, I guess. We hope to go and look at it.
Okay, wonderful, very good. And that display will be available for what? 2 months? 2 months, probably through March then.
January and February.
January and February, okay, fine. Well, get on down to the library. If you're there, you'll see it. It's on the far entrance. It's at the southern entrance, not the eastern entrance. Is that correct?
It's the entrance on Franklin Avenue.
Franklin Avenue entrance, that's a correction, rather than direct yourself to directions. Okay, but thank you very much for doing it. I understand the display is beautiful. Okay, moving on. A big thanks to Allison Meyer and her team of the board of directors and others that got involved. I know Frank Genova was in on this thing. Where are you, Frank? Right there. And the point is, we have a wonderful program for 2015. We have the usual 8 lectures or presentations. Tonight it's the first of the 8. And we have an annual tea in June. And the annual tea this year is always TBA, to be announced. Date, time, and place. But I guess I can tell you where it's going to be. It's going to be at Elliot and Susie Clark's estate out in Mavinsville. Actually, it's Lithgow. It's Lithgow. And it's all the way through Lithgow, and it's right. He has a fallow deer farm, I believe, there, and a gorgeous garden complex that he personally manages. So we're going to have a reception there between 5 and 7. We're going to be cutting back on the regular food, but we'll have some, hors d'oeuvres and drinks and so forth. It'll be a very festive and a beautiful event. It will be in June. We'll tell you what the date is as we get closer. So that's what the score is. But again, back to Allison and her team. Thank you again for putting together such a fine program for 2015. We're just on a roll. So thank you. Thank you, thank you. And the last administrative item before we turn it over to Jim Boice is that this last fall, we replaced a couple of directors whose terms has expired and moved on for various reasons. But we then came into a situation where our loyal and very well-serving Vice President, Charlie Simons, and that gentleman was walking around in the back over there, decided that he is going to move back to what's called Director Emeritus status. He had been emeritus and or a director, then he moved into the Vice President slot, served us very well, conducting a couple of meetings for me in my absence, showing up at all of our meetings, contributing on a regular basis, and probably most important of all, getting us the refreshments at the end of the meeting. So thank you, Charlie, for all of your work there. And Charlie has worked with me until a replacement to be named. Said he would stay on through February next month of 2015. So thank you for doing that. But we do have a name for you for your consideration. It has been vetted and approved by your board this evening in an earlier session, and I'm very pleased and proud and very glad to announce that the board is offering for your consideration tonight by voice vote the candidacy of Diane McNeil, a long-serving director. She's been vice president on 3 occasions? 3 occasions in the past. So, recycle. Like they recycled me. Diane is another person recycled. In any case, I'm delighted to have Diane as our vice president. But we need your affirmation by voice vote. So may I have a motion to...
So moved.
So moved. Thank you very much. Second?
Second.
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Congratulations, Diane McNeil. Now, her effective date of office starts March 1st. Again, a big thank you to Charlie Simonson for doing what you've done for us. Well done.
Very good,
And back to emeritus, right, Charlie? Okay. All right, fine. Jim Boice, I would like you to come on up here and make the presentation. Let me see now. Allison, would you like to make some introductory comments? I mean, Jim's a well-known personality. We all know him, right? He was with us last January and did a beautiful job describing what he does with his family and his relatives up at the Dutchess County Fair on a regular basis, the antique machinery exhibit. And I hope you all got up there this last August, because I revisited them. I'll go every year as long as they have it. It's a wonderful, wonderful contribution to the fair. It's fun to watch those antique machineries in action. It's really quite exciting. Jim, welcome back.
Stan,
You have the floor.
I could say just
Yes.
a word or two.
Well, Allison, why don't you say that word or two?
I guess I never
Go ahead.
said a word or two.
Go ahead.
Quick, I just want to say that Jim is the one who came forward to us and said, oh, I have this idea, I'd like to talk about World War II and the effects of it on the auto industry, and particularly our daily lives right here in Milton. And we were most pleased, and we had already set the agenda actually for this year, for the 2015 programs, and we unanimously changed it at the board in November, I guess. We wanted Jim on there. And then everyone I talked to around the community goes, oh, yes, Jim, yeah, okay, I'm coming.
Okay, great. Well, Jim, do you need any further introduction? The floor is yours. Go ahead.
Well, as Allison said, that was the topic I gave her. In the meantime, it's expanded with Allison's suggestions, and you see the pictures of auto dealers, stations. We've got our year's work cut out for us, a lot of us doing research, and we've got people around between the audio boys and different people, Reed Benton, he's found information, and different people who can help us with what went on here in Millbrook, because I'm confused on some of the dealerships. Some of them changed 2 or 3 times onto it. But we'll start in with the rationing. I lived at the Millbrook Pheasant Farm, the Davisons' place from 1935 to 45. So that was during World War II. And so I saw the effects. Probably the thing that I saw most was the effect on travel, automobiles, the auto industry, because that interested me more than food and things like that. It had stamps and so on. And so it really put a crimp in people's style. How would you like to be told, oh, you can only buy so many gallons of gas this month and have stickers for it? And I have on the table here a rationing sticker that went in the windshield. You can look at it afterward. Mark Jamon kindly loaned this 25 years ago. He found a fellow advertising some of these. And he paid serious money to get a couple of them. One of them is on his 37 GMC truck, and this is the other one. And this is what you would have on the windshield. And if you find an antique car, of course it's got to be a car, 20s and 30s, that has, and they're not as prevalent in car shows, people going for later stuff, that has a sticker on it. That's a very cherished thing to find an original sticker. Now I don't know whether the T stood for truck or anything, I don't know. There were a whole bunch of different letters and different stamps. But like in my father's case, we had to go to Freedom Plains every week and to Stanfordville every week because I had a grandmother each place. And we had to go all in groceries, the coal, take out the ashes, whatever they needed. So this was a constant thing. So you were constantly running back and forth. You didn't get to go on trips for pleasure once a month. They worked on the estate there 6.5 days a week. You got one afternoon a week off, and you were expected to be back there at dinner that night. So that is the it curtails your running a great deal. But the car my father had then was a 30 Buick. He got it with 60,000 miles. People said, oh, high mileage. He was worn out. In those days, a car with 50,000 miles, and it did have to have a valve job and things like that. But that car got driven 237,000 miles, and there were no more parts available for the brakes. Had to quit, and then it was a farm truck, full stumps, full drag scoop. I cut it off and put a pickup box on the back, and we had it for years. We used it around the place. That didn't kill it. Finally, a man bought it who had a 30 Buick Opera Coupe and needed a parts vehicle. So it went for 237,000 miles. That's a lot of driving on one car.
No, sir.
Because after World War II, he became a salesman and he covered a lot of the Hudson Valley, so he drove an awful lot. But you can see how it's really curtailed where you went. We didn't make any long trips. After gas rationing was all the time, we went to Arkville and we went up to near Menands, and they were considered long trips. Of course, the tires that you got were so poor. Even new tires were poor. The quality of them. Tires were rayon instead of nylon of today. And if you ever see an old tire and it says rayon on it, you want to be cautious about putting any air into it. You hear these little popping sounds. And the popping sounds are breaking the cords in the tire. I mean, a wheelbarrow tire. And we've done it. You put a little air and you hear pop, 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 pop. And you're breaking the cords. When the cords start breaking, you lost the structure of your tire. And as a kid, when I had my 40 Chevy, if you got 8,000 miles out of tires, that was wonderful. 8 or 10,000 miles. Where I replaced my tires on my Escape at 75,000. So the difference in tires are terrific. And you, for what a cost per, probably they're a better deal today because you get so much more out of them. The other thing is, you'll see in the picture there in the center, the picture of the stone building, the stone building up on Front Street, Malola's building. That's where George Welch had his tire shop. And in the center you see a small door there. Well, that was a bigger opening at the time. But he did a land office business in repair of tires. I mean, you were there constantly. My father had extra rims and extra tires. I've been there hundreds of times. The tire would get a bulge. They put a boot inside of it to strengthen it at that point, or they put a liner all the way around. You can imagine what it did to the balance of the tire. You know, anything over 20 miles an hour, and you're shook. So the quality of the tires that you could buy, and the fact that during World War II, you couldn't buy the tires. They just weren't to be had. You had to find used. His happened to be a 20-inch truck tire. Maybe 650 or 620 truck tires to use. And that didn't make it any better, or probably didn't make it any worse. It was just, it was terrible trying to find tires. So they did anything that they could do to repair them. You tear on the side. They actually get a tear on them. They put these boots inside. The boots are still made today, and farmers use them where they're going to work an awful lot of briars and stuff, so you don't get constant flat tires. They put it in, but it's a slow-speed tire, and it goes all the way around, so you're not affecting the balance of this. But the tires were a huge problem. If you went any distance, you carried a couple spares. George Welch there, he was a very popular man on tires. You say they were rayon, and as far as the boards of them. You could get recaps, they were not very satisfactory. A lot of them peeled off. It was not a wonderful thing. There were S3 tires. Now you'll see the tire there on the counter. That is a brand new S3 tire that would have gone on a garden tractor. And you'll see the S3 on the side of it. And anytime you find an old tire that has S3 on the side of it, that stands for another. Sometimes they're in red. But the red marking on that one is the number of plies. Found that in Connecticut, a brand new tire from. My brother went to a friend of ours' place and came home with that. And didn't think. You see, the tube was made in the tire, all part of it. You put it on the rim and bumped it up.
Pass it around?
Yeah, pass it around. Oh, yeah, it's a totally different concept.
It really feels different
Totally
than a
different
regular
concept
tire.
of mounting a tire that you bolted the rim through it. And
Where did you ever get this?
Yeah, don't.
it's, I've got 4 or 5 of them that I have found on old Lockmore Salties and so on. But that's the only one that's in, and I wouldn't want to put more than 5 pounds of air. Actually, they'll stand, they're so stiff, the synthetic rubber in the tires, that they stand up by themselves. You wouldn't need anything much for air in it. They used boots and liners, and as I say, the balance was a terrible problem. Now, one thing they did also was re-groove tires. And here's a tire re-groove. Some of the people who re-grooved them were not too careful. They take a tire, first thing you know, they're cutting down into the cords in the tire, and you look at the groove on these. I have used one of these on block mower rollers is hard work. Anybody who did this earned their money. But when you get it hot, and a good blade in it, you can go right along and a ribbon of rubber peels right out. Jesse probably knows about it from stock car days.
Yep, I did 2 or 3 big tires with one of those. I was told, get them done tonight. Get them done tonight.
Oh. Well, this was Kenny Bendix's from his garage.
Yeah.
I went to the auction and this was one of the things that I bought. And I have actually used it. And when I was at Bowman's, we did quite a bit of regrooving of
Yeah.
rollers.
I've seen it.
Because it was extra rubber on the roller. But there's a unique concept with that one, where you slip the rims in and bolt it together and pop it up. And they did not use that for long.
No.
That's a very short duration style of thing. If I go to an auction and there's a sulky for a lock there, I'm not interested in sulky, I'm interested in the wheels. I buy it for the wheels to get the tires, because there was a certain era of Gravely and different things you used in that style. So you can look it over later. I was surprised, it's only a 200 watt unit. It's an ideal tire mover.
Jim, how long would it take somebody to re-groove a tire?
Jesse, how long?
It depends on the type of pattern you're putting on it. For the race car, we were just putting a block pattern around it. So you went around it big ways and crossways, and you put an angle on one edge. So it just pushing on that thing after a while, you get awful tired.
Oh, man.
You're cutting through about a
What's the matter
quarter
with
of
our
inch of rubber.
shoulders these
Yeah,
days?
you're cutting through about a quarter of inch of rubber. Even though it's heating it up, it's still
It would
taking
come
a lot.
out in a ribbon of it, yeah.
Yeah,
You'd have a ribbon of
oh yeah.
rubber coming out, you'd have a mess on the floor that you made with the re-grooving the. But that's, be sure to look at it later. I had to dig to find that thing. That was in a cabinet I hadn't seen in years. So, it was unbelievable, the tire, with no tires available. You couldn't go out and buy a tire. What are you gonna do? And on the gas rationing, Carol's sister, who's 20 years older than Carol, wrote up this little thing here. Their Uncle Raymond ran a gas station in Ringdale. Later on, it was known as Callahan's gas station on the right-hand side. Raymond Raylor ran a gas station in Wingdale, New York. And during World War II, when gas was being rationed, he would have soldiers on leave stop in for gas, and he would give it to them free. Somehow the government found out he was doing that, and they gave him a bad time. Ray told them, you can put me in jail, you can fine me, but I'm going to keep giving the soldiers free gas. They are fighting for us, and that's the way it's going to be. And finally, they left him alone. He wasn't collecting any stamps, because they wouldn't have had stamps. So that's how they were caught up, with the fact that he didn't get any rationing stamps back into it. And the rationing stamps, I don't remember much about that. Frank brought in some rationing stamps, not for gas, but you got them for fuel oil there, which amazed me for World War II. The fuel oil, that would have been considered then kerosene, I guess, but there was enough demand. Of course, kerosene was very popular, so he continued to give soldiers free gasoline. I had the privilege of knowing Uncle Raymond very well. After we first got married, he was a great man, and he was instrumental in finding me a very, very early engine down on Falling Mountain that his future father-in-law and him sawed wood with. We got it in that spot on top of an outcropping of rock where it was set for forever. What was holding the wagon up, I don't know. That's another story, but anyhow, but it's, so what questions have we got on, as we go along? I wish people would input, because there are people here who are gonna know about certain aspects of the rationing and so on, a lot more than I know. I remember the awful effect it had on travel and the tires being such a huge headache. I know when my father saw an ad in the paper and there was a pair of tires his size, and they were up on Stissing Mountain. So he called the man, says, yeah, got them. We went up there, and it was all the way to the end of the Stissing Mountain Road. That road used to go right on out to 199 originally, but by that time it didn't. He was the last house on the road. Well, in the 1940s, when you went up Stissing Mountain Road, it was scary. I mean, you went through, it was rough territory. Back then, you know, dirt floored huts that people lived in. In fact, it wasn't that many years ago, they finally got everybody out of that kind of living up there. Charlie?
Jim, I seem to remember during World War II, the speed limit was 30. Remember that?
You probably did. Most of these tires you didn't want to
You
drive.
didn't want to go
No,
any faster. I remember my father looking at our front tires and seeing that white fuzzy stuff. That was the first layer of
Oh, the canvas underneath, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you didn't quit. When the rubber was gone, you would have spots of canvas showing through.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, anyway-
if they would stand up, they got run.
Yeah, one time coming home from Poughkeepsie, my mother and father, my two sisters and I were in the car, and we were just coming in Pleasant Valley, and state trooper stopped us. And my father says, what's the problem? I didn't go over 30 miles an hour. He said, well, no, you got an A license plate. The big old orange license plates with the black letters around here, it had 6A or something like that. Now, the state trooper wanted to know how come my father was all the way down here from Albany. In those days,
You had DC plates here in
in
Dutchess
those
County.
days, yeah, the license plates were allocated by counties. And if you look at a lot of old license plates around here, you'll see 3D, 2D,
That's right.
4D, because they're all Dutchess County. I don't know if a lot of people didn't know that. Well, anyway, my father told the state trooper that he mails his registration to Albany. Because at that time, he had just finished being a chauffeur at Industry, and that's the way they did it. They sent all their registrations up to Albany, and the trooper said, well, the next time you register this car, do it in Poughkeepsie. Yes, sir.
Keep the money local, like now, we buy them here in Millbrook, so we keep our license bureau. Otherwise we'll lose it.
Yeah.
You know, it's a valuable asset to have here.
I remember my father using a grooming tool, and as far as I know, I don't know the people that live there now, what they've ever done in my father's shop, but when he moved to the village, he left that there. That and some other stuff, the old wooden rimmed bicycles we had.
You know,
I don't
Kenny
know.
Bendix had that, you remember, you know, Paul Bendix's brother,
What's that?
Kenny Bendix,
I remember Kenny
Yeah,
Bennett.
yeah. He had a garage for a while, and I think he was into racing, so it could have been both that is the reason that it was in Bob Smith's auction. I used to go to garage auctions, and
I remember
pick up boxes.
I remember my father, watching my father re-grooving his tires, trying to get a few more, 15, 20 more miles out of them.
The trouble was that if you weren't awful careful, you started to cut down into the, and go into the canvas,
Yeah.
and then you were weakening the tire,
Yeah,
and the tire was gonna split, or they'd split in the sidewall. I mean, that's,
and also those rationing stickers they had to put in the windshield. I think my father had a C. Yeah, I don't know what T was, but
no, they,
I know there was A, B, and C. And the reason he had a C was because he lived in South Road and he had gotten a job at IBM. And he worked at IBM.
I don't remember what number my father had, but it barely gave him fuel enough to do these runs back and forth to Freedom Plains and Stanfordville,
Yeah, that's right.
and once a month go shopping in Poughkeepsie,
Yep.
and like that. You didn't do much to skip.
My father during the Second World War worked on the Manhattan Project in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. And they couldn't get on the place unless there was 4 people in the car.
That's right.
They had everything was carpooling.
And people riding on the running boards. Some cars were so loaded that, a lot of people don't know what running boards are, but people standing 3 and 4 on each side is amazing. Yeah.
No, if anybody told us today, that you could only have so many gallons of gas, we thought that odd and even days were bad. Can you imagine this? Of being told you could only have so many gallons, and people worked it. I mean, some people worked it. Their cement mixer had an engine on their buzzsaw,
Yeah.
the rotatory, the real mower. I mean, some people worked every angle, and naturally there were, conniving.
Remember coaching down a lot of hills to save gas?
Trouble is, back then, a lot of the cars didn't have that good brakes.
That's
Mechanical brakes, you didn't want to do too much.
One aspect I do remember is very poignant in a sense. People would gather after church, for example, outside, and kind of confer with each other as to who needed something. Have you got a problem? Count on me to take you there. And they would coordinate their efforts in travel so that people would maximize those meager gallons that they had.
Yeah, well, you had to, I say, they didn't. It
Jim?
wasn't that.
Jim,
Yes,
I don't know whether anybody remembers or not, but if you were on top of a tall hill during gas rationing, you turned the car off
That's
and
right.
rolled it down the hill.
well, that's what I'm talking about. The first car that I owned, my 33 Chevy I bought from Tony Myers, had the tidal station in Washington Hall. And I bought it from Tony. It had terrible burnt valves in it. And I took care of that. I was 14 at the time when I bought it. But he says, there's a knob there on the dash that says freewheeling. Don't you ever pull that out. And it never got pulled out. Because that completely put you out of gear.
Yeah.
Completely. You were, of course, Plymouth had it. You could have it too. I mean, you were completely freewheeling when you were.
Why was it there?
Say gas.
Well, it was a good, they thought it was a good idea, but it was a dangerous idea, particularly when you were dealing with mechanical brakes.
You bought a 33 Chevrolet from Tony Myers. I'll bet you that was my father's car, because he sold his 33 Chevrolet to Tony Myers.
Black,
He wants his money back.
black and a little rust, I think it was very solid.
Tan with black fenders.
This was black, and it changed its color concept entirely.
Yeah, my father bought that 1938 Chevrolet. I'm sure he sold his 33 Chevrolet to Tony Myers.
It might have.
Maybe he painted it, I don't know.
But this was a black, and I don't know where, but I bought that.
He also during the war, when we lived on South Road, my father had a 1923 Chevrolet pickup truck. And he sold that to some kid in Washington Hollow, and the guy wrecked it. He used it for a field car and stuff. Don Traver bought that from that guy and restored it. 1923 Chevy pickup truck. Now, Don Traver says somebody out in Oregon bought it.
Wow.
He's got it all restored and it's out in Oregon. That's amazing.
I remember seeing that.
You see, the thing is, once you got into World War II, there were no more new cars.
No.
New cars, I mean, man, it took, you had to be something awful important to get a vehicle.
Yep.
Even male people sometimes didn't get vehicles. You had to make do with what you had. That's why there were so many garages around and so much repair work and so on. And I know we were talking at a club meeting one night, and talking about the fact of, putting spark plugs in and doing points on cars and so on. Mark said, yeah, today there wouldn't be enough mechanics to handle the cars if we had to tune up a car every 10,000 miles. We bought our Ford Escape, they said at 100,000 miles, bring it back for spark plugs. It's so different, Stan.
Well, I think a comment today would be that you go in for service. Has anybody here ever taken your car in for repair recently? I don't think so. I think the concept has changed.
It's hard to find a garage, you gotta go back to a dealer.
Yeah.
You have all kinds of gas stations, convenience stores.
How many repair shops were in the village of Millbrook?
Well, we're gonna try and get a list together, but just in talking to a couple of people, Reed told me one man that was in 3 different spots.
Yes.
Reed, Johnson there, Esther
Yeah.
Pettit's father.
Yeah, I don't know whether any of you knew Harry and Esther Pettit. They lived on North Maddoxville, just a few houses up from the intersection. But her father was in automobiles quite early on. And he worked for Swifts here in the village for a while. It was a repair operation across from the Catholic Church, so Esther told me, Central Motor Company. And he worked there. And then the building on the Church Street there, Spagnola Plumbing was in there for a while. Apparently it was a garage operation in there. Now Getty Ford did use that building as well when they were in the 70s. And finally Mr. Johnson ended up in the building which Sam Audius started in across the road and just east on 44th in the present facility there. So it seemed that there was a fair amount of migration, I suppose, where you could rent the cheapest building, but where you could get a little more room to work and so forth. Who knows what all the factors were.
Yeah, Reed, you, from Esther, you had things there that he was there at Swift's in 1913.
Yes.
And from what we see, and Tommy Hennessy has the compressor that came out of the basement. And that compressor was made by Fairbanks Morse. And everybody thought it was a gasoline engine. Well, I pointed out there were some things left out, they never finished machining it. It's a compressor. People thought for years that it was an old engine. No, it's an air compressor. And the need for, particularly when you had to pump up tires and cleaning parts and so on, you needed an air compressor. So there's been a great big tank, must have taken forever to pump it up on that in the basement.
That was the building where Stills was until a few months ago.
Today is getting all its siding ripped off, but it keeps changing.
So Jim, what happened about the tires on Sissing Mountain?
Okay, on Sissing Mountain, we got off of that.
Oh, that's right.
My father answered the ad, we went up there, sure enough, the fellow had a nice pair of tires. We bought them, and that gave us some good tires, 2 good ones for a while. Never thought anything more about it. I was down with Jerry DiMartino running the gas station and in the lawnmower shop, and a man came in and wanted to buy a rotator from me. So he ordered the rotator and said, where do you want it delivered? And he says, end of Sissing Mountain Road. I took it up there. He said, the last time I was here, my father bought tires for a man who lived up there on the end of the road during World War II. He says, that was me. He was still there at the very end of the road, and I don't think I've been back there to the very end of the road. It ends again, but he finally got a good bet, but finding a good pair of tires, which, I mean, you were just running around on junk, and you might, maybe you only go to Freedom Plains and Stanfordville a couple times, and tires are a problem again. Splitting somewhere, so that's where they got into the full liners that went all the way around inside of the tire. The balance and so on. And this had to, it was cheap, but it was costly when as you were constantly having to be plagued with tire problems. Now, I mentioned no new cars, trucks, or tractors during World War II. They were not available. You had to do what you had. And by that time, actually, by the time there were very few Model T Fords running. Model A's were running around. My uncle, Wendell Fowler, had a stash of Model T parts, and Ben Sackett up on Shunpike, and Bozo Green on Front Street. You remember Bozo, our bus driver? Yep. They were still the two people that were running Model T Fords. The cars became outdated so quick. I made a comment here that I think from 1925 to 35, we saw the biggest change in automobiles as far as practical automobiles. And you went from mechanical brakes, wood framed cabs, and so on. By 36, you were getting a 35, 36. You bought a Chevrolet, you were getting a real sedan. It wasn't made up of wood. It had very little wood in it. It was where the 25 Chevy that I had and sold to Tom Hennessy, that's a wooden crate with tin nailed over it. Same way for my 32 Chevy pickup. They built a wooden frame and tack sheet metals over it. So there was huge changes. And hydraulic brakes, everything Chrysler product with hydraulic brakes. Ford was the one that held out by 35 or 36 Chevy, 36?
36
Yeah,
Chevy.
36 Chevy. And Studebaker came out with steel hydraulic brakes for a while. Well, that was cables. Made of steel hydraulic. It was a way of getting around it. Henry Ford said, no good, those hydraulic brakes. He didn't approve of the idea. And it wasn't until 39.
My 1928 Model A Ford, my father and I worked on them brakes and worked on them. We couldn't get any more than one wheel brake. One back wheel would break. Unless you pulled the handbrake on, then both of them would work.
Actually, my 33 Chevy was a very, very roadable vehicle. The brakes didn't, once I got the oil seals fixed in the back, that was the other thing that Tony Myers told me. And I had no money, so I had my father check out getting wheel seals put in. And Clayton Nace, it was going to be $40. Like $40 I didn't have. $4 for a new pair of seals I had. So I read up in the Adela's manual and went one Saturday morning to ripping and tearing. And I did it myself. And that's when I was 14. I restored that car from 14 to 16. And Charlie said here a couple of years ago, he was so envious of me in high school. I had a restored car and he had no car. He brought up the subject about my car that I painted.
I had my Schwinn bicycle though.
I have a Shelby bike.
parts for the cars when they needed to be fixed? You said that all the metal was,
Well, Swift Motors with Harry Dunn, who seemed to be our parts source. It turns out, in those pictures, it shows that in the mid-30s, before Studebaker, that had been a Chevrolet dealer. So all GM would have used the same points and same things. My father would go there and buy valves and things, because he did most of his own repair work. Yeah, and of course, scrapyards of cars for, that you get.
It's a gas station on the
parts
Village
from.
Green right there.
And, my father needed an axle shaft one time, and it was in the other end of the country, and it was weeks. By teletype they found it, and so on, so parts could be a problem. And your intervals of, you know, your brakes and all that thing, you didn't get the life out of them as you do today. One thing was that your oil that you used was so inferior to what we have today. You know, then they came out with oil with detergents in it, and in the about 1940s and so on. Well, that started creating problems. My father put that in the Buick, and pretty soon he didn't have oil pressure. It plugged the oil screen up. So down come the pan, you cleaned that. He didn't hurt anything, but so the evolution of oil today, Ford tells me to change it to 5,000 miles. The Ford dealer puts on a sticker for 3,000. Every 4,000 we service it.
Consumers Report magazine now says that oil is so good you can go 5,000 to 7,000 miles with oil changes.
You
Some of your
probably,
dealers are saying
I
12
got
now.
especially not in winter, is worse.
I've got a car with 167,000 miles on it, and I change the oil every 7,000 or 8,000 miles.
How often do you check it though?
I used to have a car that I would check it when all the hydraulic lifters collapsed.
Well, that's the problem with a lot of the new cars now, is people don't check the oil. They'll figure 8,000 miles,
No, I
and they'll
check,
just take it back to the dealer, but they won't check the oil in between times.
yeah, no, I check everything.
Serious things can happen in the meantime.
Oh, yeah.
Sender switch can spring a leak or something, you lose oil. Well, when we were at the gas station, and I was down there with Jerry DeMartine, by the time I was 14, I worked for him down there. We had a real interesting discussion one night. Mark Jamon did a program on being a Sunoco dealer. Well, I was down there with Jerry with Sunoco before Mark was ever, because Mark was a kid and worked for me in the lawnmower shop. And so Mark got me involved in it. And we had real fun on comparing notes and so on. But every car that came in, you checked the oil. And sales of oil were brisk. And the cans that when you fill them, you put them in a rack, the empty cans, and they drained out. They went down into a tank underneath. And once in a while, Jerry and I forget about that tank underneath, and it would go over, spill over on the island. That oil we put into the glass bottles. So that was 25-cent a quart oil. You'd be a mix of blends, it was just as
I
good.
was gonna say, that was multi-grade.
All the grade. All the grade, good, Jesse.
Yeah. After we moved to the village of Millbrook, my father bought a wonderful car, a 1947 Kaiser. He used to change the oil on it. He bought it and had 60,000 miles on it. This is like 1948, 49. So he had a valve job done on it, a ring, and he fiddled with the speedometer one time. I said, "What are you doing, Dad?" He says, Well, it's like a new car, I'm putting the odometer back to all zero.
He was the one that started
He did that, and when he sold that car, the odometer showed 160-some thousand miles, because he drove every day from Millbrook to IBM and Millbrook to IBM. And when he changed the oil in the garage, he'd give me the oil, and I'd put that in my Model A. So we got
Recycling.
double duty out of that motor oil.
Well, it wasn't all common, you know, it was very common that you would put oil, add oil. And then, of course, there were the unscrupulous dealers who would go out and pull it out, and when it was full, they'd put it back in, hold their finger underneath on the dipstick, pull it out and show the customer, oh, you're down a quart. No, it's short sticking. So then they ended up with an extra quart of oil in there, which 1 quart wasn't a serious matter, but it was being crooked.
A car,
To
the
do
service station on Route 9 in Poughkeepsie did that to my sister after I got out of the Air Force. She borrowed my car one day, and I had just had it serviced, grease job, oil change, and all that stuff.
Oh, boy.
And several times she said she really appreciated me loaning her my car. And before she brought it home, she stopped at a gas station and had filled up the gas tank. And the guy, she said, the guy put a quart of oil. He said it needed oil. He put a quart of oil in here. I said, is that why I was leaving a blue column of smoke coming up the driveway? So I went back up there and told him, I said, you sold my sister a quart of oil that the car did not need, and I know it didn't need it, and you'll never see this car in your yard again, and none of my friends. So you cut your own throat, pal. So, got even.
Yeah, right. During World War II, when a tractor would come up for auction, and it happened with my uncle down on, I believe it was the Marshall farm now, they were having an auction. And it was a farm all regular in 1931, which I own after many years. It's not running, but I have it. And he went to the auction and immediately brought up to the OPA ceiling price. Everybody there wanted it. So they threw all the names in a hat. And my uncle happened to be the one that got drawn as getting the tractor. And that was what I learned to drive on when I was 10 years old.
Who fixed the price, Jim? Who was fixing the price?
OPA, I don't know what OPA stood for. It was a government agency of setting the price on farm tractors. You could not, at an auction, could not sell for more than that. Right.
Office of Price Administration.
Yeah.
Okay,
Office of Price Administration.
okay. I don't know how many things they were involved in, but farm tractors was one of them.
Everything.
And we went through the papers that, when we cleaned out my aunt's attic of 70 years, and 3 of us sorted diligently. We never found that, and we never found the paperwork for the brand new John Deere that he bought from Reardon Briggs, the last John Deere that Reardon Briggs sold. John Deere's stupidness. It's another story. But, and I learned to drive on that, and that tractor, he had no tractor, everything was horses before that. So having a tractor was a big boom. And my horsepower, I ran for the tractors. And when you got a farm all I ran for that, not horsepower, but harnesses on. That wasn't my type of horsepower. I wanted to live in the wood.
My grandfather had so much trouble with the tires on his Model A Ford that he said he'd never get a tractor. He farmed with a team of horses right up to it. One of them died and he got rid of the other one, that was it.
Well, people thought that early tractors were all steel wheels. And they finally found out what a rubber tire does on a tractor for traction. It's unbelievable. I've seen a couple of cases where steel pulled, I was out at the Goshen Fair one Labor Day evening, and a man out there with an F-30 tractor pulled unbelievable load with steel cleats. But that in general, the rubber tires were a much better thing. And of course, then you could run on the road.
Right. I remember when they had to switch from steel lug tires to rubber tires on farm tractors. And my neighbor down on South Road, here on Burbank Road, George Whalen, the realtor, he got mad. He said, I'm not gonna put rubber tires on all these tractors. He made his own roads. He made his own roads over through the fields up to South Road, so he didn't have to go on the roads at all.
The steel lugs, if they got fast, Jimmy was just a little kid when Jimmy started working on the 1020, and John, was he 12 maybe?
Yeah,
And
something
he
like
went to
that.
work,
14,
and I said, can I have that tractor and work on? Yeah, but you can't have a partner. Well, he tore the engine down. The tractor came from Mavisville, George Rogers, and it had been McQuaid's, not McQuaig's, but McQuaid's, and it had no hours much onto it. And it's one of the things we use at the fair every year. And he ripped that down. That was his first adventure into overhauling a piece of equipment like that. But he was at the Hudson show with it, and a man beckoned to him over. The guy was unloading a Leon half track, like they use on ski slopes and so on, very steep half track. And it ran out of gas, and he was partway off with his trailer. So he beckons to Jimmy to come over and tow him. Jimmy went over. Jimmy said, I can't pull that. Guy hooked the chain on, it was good sod, and Jimmy went, and just to show off, he pulled it a couple hundred feet. He was going, but it was good traction. But in general, rubber tires were a big improvement for tractors. Another thing I wanted to touch on was scrap metal and scrap metal drives.
Oh, gee.
We cut ends out of more tin cans, we crushed more tin cans, and so on. And so I had here metal cans to tractors and old farm machinery. I mean, the whole thing. And it really went the whole thing. One day I said to my Aunt Rose, and it was in her later years, I said, whatever happened to the trim on the kitchen stove? That was Andy's, yeah. Yeah, it was in the 1800s. A woman bought it. It had more cracks in it. We had found more parts, more lids and so on to keep that thing going. It was, they wouldn't touch it in an auction barn or anything. No insurance company wanted to hear about it. But safety hazard. And but the trim, they took it off and sold it because it had nickel on it. And it was in need of nickel. So that's what happened to all the trim off the stove.
Yeah, but did they sell it or did they just donate it? The scrap drives, you didn't get anything for it, did you?
Well, yeah, they just, metal brought something, you were getting something. I don't know how much of it was donated. And the other thing in the family, our grandparents in Bayonne, New Jersey, had a single cylinder Rio car, which they brought up here to Freedom Plains in 1912 in a moving van. Can you imagine a moving van coming from Bayonne, New Jersey in 1912? They got all the way out to Manchester Bridge. Whoops! Moving van wouldn't go under. They had to go all back down Fishkill Plains and around. Freedom Plains they'd never seen a truck. What? And you know, this would have been, if they had all their heavy mahogany furniture, everything came, including this single-cylinder car.
Wow.
The single-cylinder car was flying in Bayonne, New Jersey. He was out of Freedom Plains twice, and that's when everybody but my grandfather got out and pushed. And it lived there in the barn until World War II, and got scrapped. But my father felt so bad about that, putting his side of the family. But we have pictures home. I have the serial number and all. I gotta sometime find out, but, you know, this is very early 1900s on that. So when you look back, it's just wondering if there's any gas engines, old tractors to restore with what got scrapped at that time. And here a few years ago, I read an article way up in the wheat country up in northern Canada. They found piles of scrap iron that were cut up for World War II and never hauled away. And in these were early tractors. So guys went up and sorted it, sorted all the stuff out. The castings would be all right, the gears would be all right. Cast iron doesn't rust near as bad as steel, and the steel is what they would have cut. You can always replace shafts and brackets and angle iron. So there were actually tractors that were put together out of parts that had been laying in piles in northern Canada that nobody realized were even there. They were out so remote in wheatland up there. What questions do we have? Because when you scrapped cars years ago, yeah.
What car dealers in Millbrook do you remember? Being 14 years old,
Okay.
I don't remember the same stuff.
Studebaker, when we went to Swift's, the Studebakers, and maybe the early Chevys, because that's, you remember Harry Dunn's
Yeah.
back Chevy? Well, that would have been sold, that he worked there, and it wasn't until I saw these pictures that came out, that they for a while were a Chevy agency. See, just to hit a few here, this is something we're gonna have to hit another time, but you had Swifts there, they had that, they had the Chevy, they had Studebaker, and so,
Jim, for clarification, just tell what buildings we're talking about now.
okay, the License Bureau, Charlie Stills,
That's
Right
what,
there,
that was
right there.
right there.
that's it,
Yeah.
and, so, that,
He was Packard too,
Not
I think,
knowing-
wasn't he? That was Packard there too, wasn't it?
I think you're right, Skip, because there was an action there with the Studebaker and the Packard and so on, so I think you're right, but I don't remember anything on that, but it
That's,
it was a good
spot
source.
tunnel there.
a good source of GM parts for my father's Buick was there, and Harry Dunn was a superb parts man, and we knew him for many years after he retired. He'd come and buy his Green Mountain potatoes that my mother raised for her every year. He had to have those. And,
Foley's,
the Foley's Ford was the Ford that I know of now. Phil Reisdorf and I worked together for Rick and Briggs. Phil tells about Model Ts coming in boxcars on the railroad. Stood on their radiators, stood up on the front, not virtually on them, but standing up, the chassis. And when they come, they'd have no running boards, no brackets, no fenders, no bumpers, a bunch of loose stuff at all. They would finish assembling the cars and get them running. I imagine Ford had tested every engine, probably.
and where was that?
Well, somewhere along the Front Street, because they had the railroad.
I know, but you don't know where those,
No, I have not found, that's something we gotta find out, who the dealer was. And Reed said your grandfather, the same thing, he had the same thing over in Mosaic for the
With the Model Ts coming in, you mean? Yeah. He took on Model Ts in
And he said that
1914.
two good men could lift up the back of the frame, or let it down, and then you put wheels on it and begin to finish assembling the car. Henry Ford had it figured out, everything. I mean, when he got parts from suppliers, he had things calculated that the boards, the parts came shipped in, had to be the right dimensions, so he could make floorboards for the cars out of them. I mean, Henry Ford didn't waste anything, and his steel was so superior to other companies. The other companies, my father had a car, a gray. I've only ever seen one gray automobile, and that was in an auction. And it was that a case. It was a cheap imitation of a Model T, darn cheap. Model Ts were, you know, they seem awful crude, but Carol's father used to go fishing in Norwalk, and they'd go from Pine Plains to Norwalk for a day and go fishing and drive back in a Model T Ford. And a friend of mine in Kingston, he and his wife went all the way to Dearborn, toured the factory out there in Model T, and go back, no problem. It took 275 pounds of parts with it. It weighed. So changed speed bands while he was there just for good luck, but he had no problems. The next week he went to Saugerties to the car show, and he and I used to judge the show in the car show. We got stuck with that for years. Couldn't get anybody else to do it. We didn't have anybody to argue with anyhow. Just the two of us. We're coming up Petition Street Hill, and he's in front of me. There's smoke, terrible, pulling over the thing. Kind of couldn't follow the choke ride. He'd been all the way to Dearborn and back. Nothing happened. But in Millbrook here, you had gas pumps down where the station is at the Tribute Garden, which is the pictures there. You had the Esso station where Marone's, wherever Taylor has their office now next to the dentist's office. Millbrook Supply, that was Chuck. What was Chuck Wicker's father's name? Chauncey? Oh.
Delancey.
Delancey, I knew it was a...
Delancey Wicker.
Oh, Delancey, yeah. And, could not think of his. They had him. Some of these things came out in these pictures.
Then
It
you
might
had
be helpful to
K,
go through the pictures and tell us where they're.
Right.
where
you
they're
had
located.
K Chevrolet over there.
Thanks to Susan and Allison, they did some fast scrambling through the archives and came up with these pictures. Thanks an awful lot. And, thanks to Frank for what he came up with on rationing, and Reed on what he came up with for us.
That's the audio
News
building
store.
now.
With the
That's
Franks,
all the
they had
building?
gas
That's
pumps.
the audio
Yes.
building.
Okay.
Jim, there used to be a service station down in South Millbrook, right?
Fred Karn.
Yeah, Fred Karn.
Yeah, okay. I
Yep.
remember that.
Remember well. In fact, that was the next one. The other place, and I don't know whether they sold gas, but you mentioned Central Motors on, what is it, North Avenue? something
Somebody
mentioned?
said it was
I
across
did,
the
Yeah.
road.
Spot Rotundo.
Right.
That was the Chrysler dealer, so. But in the time that, we knew about K Chevrolet, but I had never heard about Brady. That was Chevrolet, and Reed's father, Reed brought in a copy of an invoice that he made for his father, bought from Bill Forwado Senior, who was later the Pontiac dealer in Amenia.
Mina, my dad bought one from him.
And had Forwado bus lines that were Rudy's too.
That was
And this is
Puzzuto.
Guado.
Puzzuto. The bus line was Puzzuto.
Yeah, but Forwado had it. Bill Forwado had it, that was his garage, I know. But he had that garage, and that's where they stored the buses.
And this is William Vudo at Ray Langford Shell Service Station in Millbrook. He was looking for used cars.
It shows on that invoice, the,
Yeah, he wrote the Gas Station County.
we know about where the service was over by
I
Agway,
worked there too.
the building that was residing. But it shows Front Street as the showroom. Go up.
Chevrolet
Franklin
dealer.
Avenue, yeah. Front Street is where I had heard. Chevrolet dealer main avenue.
First Chevrolet dealer was on Front Street. He moved.
Moved up there by the theater.
Well, that's what I thought. Front Street.
Yeah,
Where
but I'm
Christopher-
still looking at the cars.
Where Christa St. Germain was,
I don't know the name.
down from Maronis.
Where the lamp post used to be.
Because I had my bicycle, I didn't really care about cars. But I remember when
We got 14 bicycles, got to be kind of mass
I
sag.
still have,
We had to have a
I
lot
still have
of
8 or 10.
Bill Fawano's daughter is Donnie DeSantis' wife.
Right.
Bill Jr. was
Yeah, that's right.
skipping our
Yeah,
class.
yeah.
Oh,
But,
Jim,
yeah.
what might have, or how would they have coincided with blacksmiths? We still had, I think, a number of blacksmiths, didn't we, in the village at this time? Maybe
Number what?
30 blacksmiths?
Over there were Paula Redmond's officers
Well-
right
Yeah,
now.
that's one.
If Reed can tell you, the blacksmith shop and his grandfather, Reed, had the blacksmith shop,
Well, he had a forest. There was a blacksmith near his garage operation in one.
and that's where they were some of the first mechanics.
Right.
And actually, between Albany and New York, his place was a place that people could get an automobile fixed. So they were working on some pretty expensive early automobiles, because there were some fine early automobiles. There was some early stuff that was, that was quality, expensive cars. Reed could give us an evening talk on that. He's got fascinating notes from his family, the newsletter article.
Not Millbrook.
But it's all in the all here in the
Yeah,
Hudson Valley. That's
That there.
it.
and the further back you go, the more connected they were.
Jim,
Yes.
I got a good question for you. All the kids on South Road and Shady Dell Road and down at Washington Hollow, Mary Rowe, Richard Rowe, remember them?
Yeah. Sure.
We all rode Grant Ball's blue and white Pierce Arrow
Mhm.
to school. Had 4 doors on each side. Do you have any idea whatever happened to that?
It became illegal for a bus because of the type of door latches and so on, and they forbid them to use it for a school bus. I've ridden that.
That was beautiful.
When the
That sucker,
Studebaker bus,
that sucker would go fast.
Bozo Green and,
Now, if you go up to Skyway in Alaska, that's what they use right now for taxis. Those same those Pierce Arrow vehicles.
Yeah,
These were the Pierce Arrows.
not that one.
No, but that's just
Yeah,
what,
I'd like to know what happened to that particular one.
well, I'm afraid it got scrapped.
They buried that somewhere.
I'm afraid it got made into scrap iron,
Because,
but man, what a luxurious vehicle.
that had
Yeah,
velvet,
white,
velvet
the
seats,
white is what I remember.
ashtrays and everything.
The white is what, and then, and of course, the beautiful wine color interior and so on. That,
Yeah, I
once in a
remember-
while, when the Studebaker was broken down, we go to school in that.
You mentioned the door handles on the Pierce Arrow. Why was that not convertible to a school bus? Safety?
Safety.
I mean, it could just
Safety
didn't.
didn't, the latches,
I
the
think
latches
because,
didn't meet safety
those
standards.
doors were in each side.
School,
Kids would
yeah,
get
I think
out
if
when
you
the
were,
drive
if you were
passed.
sitting in there, it was possible to hit one
You
with
might-
an elbow and
You might
open
knock the door open or,
So it could be opened or would open while you're in motion.
this is the Pierce Arrow where the headlights were built into the fender.
Yeah,
Came
to
out.
come up like that.
And this is a very luxurious vehicle. And there's a picture of the taxi service in Millbrook where the Sutherland House was tore down, where Whalen's office is. in those pictures that the girls copied. There, you gotta look,
Oh, I want to
look,
see that.
through,
Because, the reason I ask is because there's supposed to be a Pierce Arrow Museum in Buffalo. But I don't know, I've heard about it a couple times, but I've never investigated it.
well, I doubt it's around. I know we're running down here on the time. You want me to give a quick reference to what the pictures are?
Sure, yeah.
Tell people on that, and, very good. George Walsh's, and Swift Motors, which I'm betting that we're gonna find that was the first viable shop in Millville, but we got more exploring to do. And there's Studebakers,
Was that Murtaugh later on?
yes, Herzog.
Yeah, moving.
Well, I mean, the dealership.
Yeah, dealership, and then they had fleet of trucks and had the express too.
Yeah, they ran milk trucks out of there. They run the milk trucks and everything else up out of there. They had to,
Yeah.
that's when they hauled milk in cans.
They went out when they went to Walsh.
I see the one here, that was the taxi
Big Broadway
service.
truck.
Bob Sink drove a Studebaker.
Went out and highlighted a few
You
of
might
them.
have run a moving van.
A couple of good
Milk
shots.
trucks, they were 40-foot Great Dane trailers and the Broadway tractor.
This is just a box truck.
Yeah, I was trying to move that.
Foley's, when we were in high school.
This is the car service.
Yeah.
Yes.
The same ones coming up on the wall?
Yeah.
Now,
I was trying to see
your
that.
used cars, and used and new cars were over towards Sam Carub's shoe shop. And so that vacant lot in between was where the car
Yeah.
lot was. Noble, Good Golf, Noble Supply,
That mobile was Wickers there.
there's the two gas pumps out there, we were trying,
I think those tanks are still there.
Reed and I were wondering about that. What did you say, the woman's comment, about the number of gas pumps that have been in Noble?
Well, that was this morning, Melanie Briggs Farrington just commented, she's younger than I am. She commented just a number of gas pumps that were in Millbrook where you could pull up and fill up.
And some of them are pretty elaborate. Glass top.
How big would a tank have been at that time? Have they changed?
They used to say
Well, it
500
came in
gallons,
barrels.
was a big tank.
That's it?
It came in barrels originally, right, Reed?
That's the-
I mean, your grandfather had barrels
That's
of
where the
gas.
antique places.
Metal or
Where Hisman's garage is down there, he had 3 500-gallon tanks that was supposed to be the biggest
That's where motor vehicles is.
gas supply that was in the whole area. Had 3 500-gallon tanks, he had 3 pumps there.
Johnny Kaling's there, the gas pumps there. I mean, you can buy gas
That's the
for
same building. The side piece, driveway up into the shop.
There's the Swift Motors,
Yeah.
the Chevrolet,
And fancy hardwood floors on.
driving out.
Oh,
And
yeah.
on the bottom, there's a caption about the Chevrolet.
That's looking out of that building across the road.
And you got pictures of
That's
looking out from the
That's where the
inside.
apartments are opposite St.
Over,
Joseph's now.
Is that, no, not Knights of Columbus, Grange Hall?
Grange
Huh?
Hall.
Grange Hall.
That's not Third Avenue, that's how it's
The
looking
parking lot,
out.
the
Still
Wayland's
building
parking.
across to the Grange Hall. Little
Knights
Grange
of
Hall,
Columbus
there's
was the
parking
other one
lot
up
now.
across from the line.
Yes.
No, do take a look at the, pictures.
Remember going there, down here, they were ready to.
As far as I'm concerned, everybody's on the committee to help us find more pictures, more information. Because I think Allison's got us started down the road, something interesting that we gotta work on is Reed and Roots, name of a person who may have,
Nice red brick.
hopefully has saved those photos, old photos
That's our old
and so
house.
on. And so we've gotta So everybody, gotta help us on.
We lived there.
That's Anthony's old house, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You ever hear of this company? You did these stores?
No, that's Philippi.
Nope,
Yeah,
that's
Jonathan
Corner
gets
News
my
Store.
Corner news store.
Corner News.
Any other questions?
That's,
Oh, that's it.
Turn it back to Stan.
That's Wicker.
Thank you very much.
No, that's
for joining us.
Corner News
Enjoyed it.
Thank you. It's always a fun group to ask questions, and people, I like the participation of people.
Well, it's always a lot of fun to find out about the local history and understand, as you pass by, say, well, that used to be that, and that used to be there. And I said, yeah, it's fascinating. I ran across the fact that where the Still building is today was, as I understand it, and it was reaffirmed tonight, was a Studebaker shop. And so I was in a public meeting with a major official in the village of Millbrook, and the individual turned to me and said, "What's a Studebaker?" Oh, boy, does it age me. Okay, well, there you go.
Here's something that I looked today, on, and my brother and I saved this out, we cleaned out a fellow's garage. By golly, this is a metal can for tire tube repair. Where used to do lots of that. It's got the scrubber on the top, and rough enough.
Repair kits. Repair kits. They were great.
It's a tube of cement inside, and we really wanted to make a mistake, put the cement on it, let a match to it. Boom! Wham the match on.
Yeah.
And patches on bicycle tubes and everything, matching tires.
Then they used to vulcanize during the Second World War. They came little metal things that you scratched and lit to get the heat to, for the rubber to go.
When I was a kid growing up in the late 50s, I discovered a lot of these in the back of the cellar of my father's place. My father was born in the 1800s, so he dated there. But I said, well, what is this thing? And took it apart, started playing with it, and by that time it was so aged, it literally deteriorated, it disintegrated in your hands. You tossed them out. I said, you know what a foolish thing. Today, what antique value that would have if I held on to them. But you don't think about those things at that time.
Think about the stuff you threw out.
But thank you very much for being here tonight. Thank you again, Jim Boice, for being with us. We'd love to have you. Yeah, we have some refreshments in the back for you, but thank you very much for coming tonight, and drive safely going home.